everybody. Oh, wow, I am very tan. Woo! That Weekend at the Cape is not looking me back at all. So today I'm going to be listing off my favorite movies of all time, which you could probably guess from the title of the video. I'm gonna straighten this a little bit. No, that's... Can never get the camera, like, just right. It's either, like, too far left or too far... whatever. This is a video that I wanted to do for a while, but it's taken a long time to write. Obviously it's been kind of hard to narrow it down to a top 20 because I like a lot of movies. So I guess, without further ado, I'll start counting down. These are my top 20 favorite movies of all time. Actually, you know what, before we, do that, I want to just list a couple of honorable mentions first. These are movies that I really want to put on the list, but I can't because I'm only doing 20, but I still want to talk about because I really like them. Yeah. So, first I'll mention is Unbreakable, which I've briefly talked about in my vlog on Split. This movie for me just gets better every single time I watch it. I love that it's a darker, more unique take on the superhero genre, and I think it's really interesting that this movie came out before the huge superhero movie boom that we have now. For that reason I feel like it's very ahead of its time. In terms of, I would actually say that this is M. Night Shyamalan's best film. I like it a little bit more than The Sixth Sense, although obviously I really do like The Sixth Sense too because it's an incredible movie. Main reason why I think it's a little bit better is, well, first of all, I think that the story is a little bit more engaging, but more importantly, I think that the twist at the end, which obviously I'm not going to spoil if you haven't seen it, but I feel like there's so much more that you can read into it than the twist in The Sixth Sense. You know, the twist at the end of The Sixth Sense, it's kind of like, you know, you see it once, then you're like, okay, you get it, but with the twist ending for Unbreakable, I feel like there's so much more that you can read into it, and you can keep going back and watching it and understanding more and more each time you do. And I think it just has a better rewatchability factor, and it doesn't necessarily take away from the viewing experience in the way that The Sixth Sense does. Not that the twist in The Sixth Sense is bad, it's by no means bad, but I feel like I said before, you see it once, and then, like, if you watch it again, like, you know everything that's gonna happen, whereas in Unbreakable, I feel like there's just so much more to it, so much more depth. So my next movie for my honorable mentions is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This, I feel, is my personal favorite out of all the Harry Potter movies. I feel like towards the beginning of the Harry Potter series, it's a lot more lighthearted, and, you know, they're just focused on, you know, more trivial things like winning the House Cup and exploring Hogwarts, whereas by the end, it gets a lot darker and deals with more serious issues. This, I feel like, was a perfect mix of those elements in between. I feel like this is a great way to balance both of the, fun, lighthearted aspect of the Harry Potter series, as well as the darker tones to it. Something that I particularly love about this movie is, the characters and just how they all interact. I feel like this is the movie where everyone finally comes together and they really form this bond, especially, and I also love the introduction of, Luna Lovegood. She's a great character. And I feel like it really embodies what the Harry Potter series is all about, which is really the idea of friendship and working together and all that good stuff, and I feel like this is the first movie where you really see this, like, this team form between all of them, and it's just really fun to watch. So yeah. My next movie for honorable mentions is Ratatouille. Obviously it's Pixar and I love Pixar, and I'll just say this really quick. Pixar for me is one of the things that really got me into loving film and, like, the art of filmmaking, I guess. I remember my sister and I, whenever we got a Pixar movie, we would always watch the behind-the-scenes stuff, and it was always just so fascinating to see all the work that goes into the movie, from pre-production until marketing it, and we were always just so fascinated by it, especially with Pixar's processes and what they have to do to kind of balance both the wants of the company, Disney, and both their artistic desires. That I feel was really inspiring for me, and I feel like I owe a lot to Pixar personally just for getting me into what I'm doing now. One particular thing that I really love about Pixar is, and it especially shows in Ratatouille, is that they can take ideas that look so strange on paper, and yet they can turn it into something incredible. I mean, when you really think about it, like, the basic plot of this movie is that a rat wants to become a chef, and he goes to Paris and becomes a chef. You know, on paper that sounds really stupid, but they just make it so interesting to watch and really tangible, and it doesn't feel silly for a second when you're watching it. I think that that's just so incredible. It takes a lot of talent to be able to do that. I love the message of, you know, anybody being able to do what they want. You know, talent can come from anywhere. And I especially love Ego's monologue at the end. Of course, being something of a critic myself, I found it very relatable. But it's just such a great speech, and I absolutely love it. I love the characters, I love the animation, it's good, and yeah, it's one of my favorites. My last honorable mention on this list is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Steven Spielberg is just one of my favorite directors, obviously. I mean, how can he not be? I love his style of direction, and I feel like this film really is the prime example of it. I think that the way that he shows the lives of all the characters, it really gives you such a great in-depth feel into the emotions of these everyday people who are just suddenly confronted with these otherworldly beings coming into our planet. And I love that it kind of has this little message that was so unique at the time, because a lot of films dealing with like aliens were kind of like, you know, aliens are coming for us, and they portrayed aliens like really scary, like demonic forces, and this was the first movie to really kind of suggest like, maybe they're not bad, maybe they just want to help us and be our friends, and I don't know, just something about that I think is so unique, and I really love that. I don't know, that kind of brings up the message that maybe our world is just as strange as theirs in a sense. And also, John Williams' score, amazing, or I like to call him J. Will, personally, because he's awesome. I go to see him in concert just about every year, and he's amazing, and they usually play the music from Close Encounters, and they have like the clips from the movies, and it's awesome, and yeah, it's really fun. So, love you, J. Will, love you, Spielberg, yay! Okay, so let's actually get into the list now. Number 20 is Mary Poppins. This is a childhood favorite of mine. I used to watch it all the time, although I admit that I would usually watch it very late for some reason, so I would sometimes be asleep close to the end, but I have rewatched it several times since then and not fallen asleep, so yeah, it's good. I love the sets, especially in the film. I love the chemistry between all the characters, and all of the songs especially. I actually just bought the soundtrack, and I have it on my phone, because I'm a dork, and it's really good, and yeah, I love Julie Andrews' voice, and it's really, really sad that she can't sing anymore, because she has just such a pretty voice, like, especially in this and both Sound of Music. Okay, yeah, that's number 20. So number 19 on my list is Bridge on the River Kwai. Did I say River Kwai? River Kwai, okay. This is no doubt one of the greatest war movies ever made. It's one of my favorites, definitely. I think the thing that separates it from a lot of other movies like Saving Private Ryan, I cannot talk with these things, and I have my own Invisalign in. But I think the thing that separates it from movies like Saving Private Ryan or even Dunkirk is that I feel like it has this kind of sense of cynicism to it. As something that I kind of like to call Kurt Vonnegut-ism, where he just kind of has this like this irony and just kind of like this nonchalant attitude toward everything that's going on. I'm gonna move this again, sorry. I love how they really show both sides of the story that's going on. They show just as much of the emotions as the Japanese general that has all these British prisoners, and they do the British soldiers and their captain and everything that's going on. I love how Guinness's character really kind of loses sight of the bigger picture of what the army's fighting for in World War II, and he just becomes so focused on this one project of building a bridge that he doesn't even realize that in the end he is technically helping the enemy, but even when they are able to be saved, he still wants to do it so bad because it's all he's been working on for the past couple of months, and I don't know, it's just so ironic and funny to me. Something, I actually did watch the behind the scenes documentaries on this film, and the producer Sam Spiegel said something that I really found it just really resonated with me. He said good scripts come out of conflict, not agreement. I feel like that's such a definitive statement on what filmmaking is all about, because it is a collaborative process. I mean, you can't make a movie, even if it's just like a simple home movie, like you can't do it by yourself most of the time, unless you're really resourceful, which if you can, kudos to you. But again, yeah, filmmaking is very much a collaborative process, and it really does show there is always going to be conflict, and conflict is what makes art so great. I think this movie really like makes a statement about what it's actually like to be there, like in combat during war, and how different it is for people who are actually living it, as opposed to people who just see movies and newsreels about it. It really just shows like how much one can lose sight of the bigger picture when they're actually living it, and how important the bigger picture really is when you're just fighting for your own survival and you're just dealing with your own problems and so focused on this one task that you have to do. One word that they particularly repeat a lot throughout the ending of the film is madness, which I think just kind of sums up the whole movie in general. I love that they have this kind of like, almost like sarcastic kind of tone at the end, where they have like this big cheery army music playing as they're zooming out and showing like the destruction of the bridge. Just, I don't know, something about that. Like, I just love how, you know, so many people see like the ending of World War II as like this big happy celebration, when they just kind of remind you that all of the destruction that was left behind. And honestly, I just love it when movies kind of like take a minute to say like, hey, the fuck is wrong with us? Like, I don't know, I just think that it's just such a unique film. It has such a biting, sarcastic tone to it that I really love. Number 18 is The Prestige. Christopher Nolan's another guy you're gonna see a lot on this list, and for good reason. I've mentioned this in my vlog on Dunkirk. Nolan, I think, is one of the best directors, if not the best director working today. One thing that I particularly love about his style is that he's very immersive. You know, every shot is so carefully crafted to make you feel like you're really there in the story. This is actually one of the lesser known Christopher Nolan movies, so I guess I'll briefly describe the plot before I go any further. So basically, it's about a rivalry between two magicians in the late 1800s or early 1900s, if I remember correctly. They're played by Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, so it's like a little, you know, Batman versus Wolverine fight. Basically, what sparks off the rivalry is that Bale's character accidentally kills Hugh Jackman's wife, and so now they kind of like have this little rivalry going on, and they both go to really extreme, dangerous lengths to become the better magician and create new, kind of dangerous tricks. And it's just such an intriguing story to watch, especially when you get both sides, and just see how they're kind of like losing their minds over this. Probably my favorite line in the whole movie is, "Are you watching closely?" which is said, it starts off the film right at the very beginning, and I believe it's repeated once or twice afterwards. It's said in the scene where Christian Bale's character is explaining a magic trick to this little kid, but it's also said at the beginning as kind of a hint to the audience. It's kind of telling the audience to watch the film closely and look out for kind of certain clues that hint at the twist ending, which is awesome, by the way. If you haven't seen it, obviously I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's really good. I was shook. It's really clever. And when it comes down to it, film is basically a magic trick. You know, it's a way to kind of get us sucked into the world so that you kind of forget about all the behind-the-scenes stuff that's going on. And it just accomplishes everything that film was meant to do. And it's fantastic. Definitely see it if you haven't. It's amazing. So number 17 is the 1996 version of Hamlet, directed by Kenneth Branagh. I've already talked about this movie in another video that I did with my sister and one of my friends a couple of years ago, so I'll be pretty brief on this one. This, for me, is definitely the best Shakespeare adaptation I've ever seen. You know, some others have been pretty good. I know that I saw a Macbeth adaptation that they did a couple of years ago with Marion Cotillard. That's probably not how you pronounce her name, but it was pretty good. But I feel like of all the Shakespeare adaptations I've watched, none have come this close to really capturing all of the complex themes and ideas at once. The video I made in the past, I feel like, is kind of not very fair in hindsight. We were basically comparing the film to a play version that we'd seen in Boston. But, you know, it was a low-budget play, you know, they had minimal props, like, you can't, there is no comparison, you know, it's not fair to compare that to this huge, big-budget Hollywood movie that did not cut anything from the play, whereas the play that we saw, they cut out entire scenes. So they missed a lot of, the central conflict in the story. Not that I think that it completely detracts from a film to not have everything in there. Again, this is like a 4-hour-long movie because I don't believe they cut out anything, or I think they might have cut out one scene at most, but for the most part they leave the script completely untouched. So it's very long, which is kind of a turn-off for some audiences, I know. For me personally, I feel like it's worth the length. You know, there's never a point where I feel like it drags on for too long, even though it is 4 hours long. I feel like the pacing in the film is so good that you don't even notice how much time you've spent watching the film. I mean, there definitely are a little bit of scenes that I feel like could have been edited out of the film and not really detracted from anything, so that it wouldn't be as long, but it's great the way that it is. And I think overall it's worth every second. So number 16 on my list is Mad Max Fury Road. This is a movie that's basically just an explosion of adrenaline and insanity and weird stuff, and it's awesome. I love it. Every stunt and action sequence in this film is spectacular. There's nothing from this movie that I would cut. I love every minute of it. I love the dark comedy that they mix in. I feel like it really works well with this environment and this world that they set up. A lot of people compare the film to, like, classic, like, modern day action sequences. I feel like it's more, for me personally, I feel like what it reminded me of was the old-timey, you know, Buster Keaton movies, in the sense that it never stops. It just throws one thing after another at you. There's hardly any moments in the film where they just take a break. There's maybe like one or two, but for the most part it's just constant action, constant things getting thrown in your face, and it's amazing. One thing I particularly like about the design of the set is that it looks a lot different from like most of the post-apocalyptic worlds that we see in movies nowadays. It doesn't just look like a deserted wasteland, like they are able to make all these cool and like creative gadgets. I feel like it just utilizes the props in a lot more clever ways, and which I really appreciate that. Going back to the whole Buster Keaton thing, another reason that I feel like this movie reminded me of that is, they don't really have a whole lot of dialogue. It basically is a lot like a silent film. It relies very much on visuals instead of dialogue to kind of tell the story, which obviously, like, I always appreciate when a filmmaker can do that. I mean, dialogue is good. It's good to have, definitely, but I always prefer it when people are able to not have to rely on that too much to tell the story and really just rely on different shots and visuals. Like I said before, the film, it just never stops. It just always keeps going to it, just always throwing something at you. And I just felt really giddy and like full of energy after I watched it for the first time. Like I just wanted to like run around my house for 2 hours, but I didn't actually do that because I'm lazy and I don't actually have the energy to do that. I just think that I do, but I don't, because I'm lazy. Yeah. Only thing I've gotten kind of weird is that it's called Mad Max, but like Max isn't really like mad or insane. It's really everybody else, which I think he says. Yeah, he does say that in the beginning of the movie. I don't know. Simple observation I made, but yeah, good movie. If you haven't seen it, why? You should. yeah. So number 15 on my list is The Secret of Roan Inish. This is a film that's not super well known. I actually first found it in like a Walmart, and we just saw the DVD and we just bought it because it looked interesting, and we watched it and we really liked it. So I feel like it should be a lot more well known. So basically the story is that it's this little girl who lives in Ireland, and she goes to live with her grandparents after her mother dies. And she kind of discovers this kind of backstory that her family has, where supposedly they're related to Selkies, which are like half human, half seal creatures, so they're something like mermaids. And she is looking for her little brother, who they say drowned, but she finds out that he's just been taken away by the seals because they're family, and it's all about her trying to get her brother back and trying to kind of really go back to the roots that her family came from. It's just such a unique and interesting story. It's just such a really cool fairy tale that has this great sense of wonder and kind of ambiguity to it. The only thing I would say as far as negatives, it only really would be a negative to some people, is that the pacing in it is very slow. There are scenes that go on for a very long time, and for some people they may not get why, and it might be a little boring to watch. Personally, I would say that the excellent story does kind of make up for it. The slow scenes really didn't bother me that much because I was just still like so invested in what was going on, and I really liked the characters. The music and cinematography as well is just amazing. Ireland is so pretty, and every time I see this movie it makes me want to go, because I've never been to Ireland, but I really want to go because it's so pretty. The movie looks so great, and it's just a fantastic story. Definitely check this movie out. So like I said, not everyone's gonna like it. I think that the slow pace would be a turnoff for some people, but I'd still definitely recommend it, because it's just so good. Although I will say one thing, let me get the DVD. Okay, so this is the DVD. Look, this is the back of it. This is all that's on the back. It's like 2 sentences. Like, really, this movie is awesome, and that's all you can think to say about it. Oh, by the way, that's her brother. Little brother in the little boat. Cute. But yeah, like, really, that's lazy, guys. Come on. This movie should be better advertised than that. Yeah, that's about it. It's really great. Definitely see it. And tell them to make a better DVD cover, because that sucks. Number 14 on my list is La Vita è Bella, or Life is Beautiful. This is an Italian film, and it's basically a comedy that takes place during the Holocaust, which, yeah, on paper, that sounds really bad, but I don't know, just something about it really works, and it's almost hard to put my finger on what it is exactly. The premise of the movie is there's this Jewish Italian family that's basically dealing with the Nazi regime and their anti-Semitic policies, and ultimately being put in a concentration camp. And even though the movie is carried by a lot of humor and lighthearted moments, there's never really a moment in it where it feels like it's in bad taste or it's being disrespectful, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's not necessarily a movie so much about the Holocaust, it is just about this family and their interactions and dynamics and how they kind of rely on each other and support each other through this difficult time. It's a really good statement about, like, family and just sticking together and finding happiness in spite of all the tragedy that's going on around them. It's really heartwarming, and the characters are all really likable, which definitely is a huge part of why the movie works. And I think that to make a film centered around such a dark and painful period of history is a really difficult thing to do, especially when it's going for this more lighthearted and upbeat tone. So I definitely have a lot of respect to the writers and director of this film. And I think it's definitely worth a watch. It is a foreign language film. I know some people don't like the subtitles for some reason, because they don't like reading while they're watching the movie, but like it's worth it. So like, even if you're not a person who really likes watching foreign language films, like, stop being lazy and just watch it, because it's good. Okay, number 13 on my list is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I really don't even need to explain why I love this movie so much. It's household name, everybody's seen it, everybody loves it, and for a perfectly good reason. Probably my favorite thing about the movie is just how universal it is. Anybody can watch Raiders of the Lost Ark and find something to love it, whether you're a kid, an adult. It's just stuck with me throughout my entire life. I mean, when I saw it when I was little, and I just liked the adventure and the action. But now that I'm older, when I'm rewatching it, I really see the commentary on religion and Nazi Germany that it's making. And I think that it's just the perfect movie to grow up with because there's so much you can get out of it no matter how old you are. It just keeps giving you more as you get older. It's funny, it's action-packed, it's suspenseful, I love it, and so do you. Okay, number 12 on my list is WALL-E. I love robots, especially in movies, because they're cool, and I like cute robots, and WALL-E's adorable, and so are like pretty much all the robots in the movie. And yeah, and again, it's Pixar, so, you know, it's gonna show up on this list a lot. I just love the world of WALL-E. I love this kind of like post-apocalyptic, futuristic world it sets up, especially because it does feel like it really could exist. I love it. It makes great commentary about the environment and commercialism, but it never goes like too over the top with it. I love that they just make this world entirely out of robots, and like there's hardly any dialogue, especially in the first half. Like it's just all these robots interacting with each other visually. Some people say that for that reason they like the first half of the movie more than the second half. Like they're into the whole thing with WALL-E and Eve just interacting with each other. But once it gets to the spaceship and there's this whole other plot with the humans trying to get back to Earth, like they just don't really care that much. And like I get that, definitely. I do agree that the first half is better. I like the simplicity of just WALL-E being with Eve. And it does get a little more like crazy when it gets to the spaceship. But I still really do love the second half, honestly. I love the characters they introduce. I love the satire that they make, especially with like people like not even like wanting to talk to each other, they just have to talk to screens, and when they're sitting like right next to each other, I just think that's so funny. I love the visuals, especially the scene where Eve and WALL-E are like out in space and they're like just chasing each other with the fire extinguishers. It just looks so pretty. Oh no, that's my favorite scene in the movie. I just love it so much, and I love Eve and WALL-E because they're so cute. I mean, to this day, I would definitely say that this is probably the best looking film that Pixar ever made, which of course is saying a lot. One other thing that I really like is that they're able to kind of push a message about the environment without being like too like over the top, like shoving it in your face, because whenever kids movies especially, or really any movie, tries to base it around an environmental message, it just comes off being like really preachy usually, like, you know, with Ferngully and Avatar, you know, stuff like that. But this never seems to, like, it doesn't like, while it doesn't beat you over the head with its message, like, it gets its point across, but it's not like so in your face that it just gets annoying. It's pretty rare, especially for kids, to be that subtle and clever about it. It's just a stunning movie and I love it to death. Number 11 is To Kill a Mockingbird. In my opinion, this is about as perfect a book-to-film adaptation as you could get. To Kill a Mockingbird is actually my favorite novel of all time. I read it first in 8th grade, and then I read it again in 9th grade, because we were actually doing a unit on the book then. But I read it in 8th grade first, just because I wanted to read it, and I absolutely loved it. I think it has some of the best written characters of all time, especially Atticus. Atticus is the man, and I love him and he's awesome. there was actually, when we were doing our final for 9th grade English, there was a question, a multiple choice question that my teacher put on the test. It said, is Atticus Finch the man? And the only option was yes. And I was like, I approve of this question. I do. It's good. I love that the novel makes these great statements about racism and prejudice, and the movie definitely does it justice. Every performance in the movie is stellar, especially Gregory Peck as Atticus. He steals, like, everything that he's in, especially the closing court monologue. Something that some of the purist fans of the book were a little upset about is that they cut out kind of major plot points like Aunt Alexandra coming to the house. That really didn't bother me that much. I think that the goal of film adaptation of a book shouldn't just be to get every plot point in the book, but rather to get the central themes and ideas across, which the movie absolutely does. The movie nails pretty much every note that the book hits, and it had the same impact on me when I watched the film for the first time as when I read the book for the first time. If you haven't seen it, it should definitely be on your radar. Definitely check it out. Number 10 is Inception. Yes, more Christopher Nolan. I'm a very diehard Christopher Nolan fangirl. I'm not apologizing for it at all. This is a film that is just so unique and original. It honestly just goes beyond belief. I love that it's basically kind of a maze of a story, which makes sense considering that the whole premise is that the characters have to work their way through a maze of dreams. Especially with how bizarre all the concepts in the movie are, it could have very easily fallen into the trap of being way too exposition heavy, with characters just having to constantly explain everything that's going on. But it actually does do a great job of keeping that balance and relying just as much on emotion as it does on plot. It's like Christopher Nolan could see everything that could have gone wrong with the movie and just fix it ahead of time. It also goes without saying that the visual effects are fantastic, and paired with the intense action in the movie, it just looks unbelievable. Something that a lot of people said about this movie, which I don't really get, is that they found it confusing even after several watches. I never found it that difficult to follow. I mean, yeah, when I first saw it, there was some stuff I didn't get, but pretty much by the second viewing, like, I understood everything. I mean, I think that Christopher Nolan does a good job of, like, keeping the audience informed of, like, what's going on, and I never really found it to be that difficult to follow, and I don't get why people say that. I mean, yeah, obviously it's a confusing concept, it's a confusing idea, but, like, the way that people are talking about it, you think it was, like, some bizarre, like, Terrence Malick type Tree of Life thing. Like, it's really not. I really don't get why people say that. Personally, I think the movie's fantastic, and I find something new to enjoy every single time I watch it. Number 9 is Spirited Away. I saw this movie a couple of years ago, and it really brought back the same kind of feeling that I got when I was little and I'd go to see a new Disney movie. I mean, except for Chicken Little. We don't talk about that movie, but no, beside the point. I think the thing that works about this movie is that we see the world that it creates through the eyes of a child, namely Chihiro, the main character. I mean, we feel just as lost as she does, and we see this kind of weird fantasy world entirely through her eyes. There are also a lot of really creative creature designs. They're really inventive. I mean, it's Miyazaki, so that's kind of to be expected. It also has commentary on the environment, not as much as WALL-E, but again, it's also, like, not, like, in your face. Which I always appreciate when a kid's movie can do that. Something I kind of noticed is that greed seems to be like a common theme in a lot of Studio Ghibli movies. Here I think it works out the best. They kind of portray it through the character of No Face. I just love to say he's this giant claw that just eats everything he sees, and I don't know, it's just, something about that thing is just so funny visually. But again, it also does, like, make good commentary as well. It's by far my favorite Miyazaki movie. I think it's phenomenal and definitely worth a watch. Okay, I'm gonna be really cliche with this next one. So yeah, number 8 is Citizen Kane, and I know it's really cliche to put the movie on here, but obviously there is a reason why so many people consider it to be the greatest movie ever made. I mean, it's really hard to know what even to say about it without repeating what dozens of people have already said. Whereas Inception was essentially a maze of a story, Citizen Kane is more like a puzzle. You hear different pieces of his life from different people, but the movie constantly reminds you that it doesn't mean you know him. You never quite figure him out. I love how the movie opens up with a very nonchalant newsreel summing up his life, but then we get more context from the people who actually knew him and were there. It really made me think about our tendency to judge people, especially, famous people, when we hear things about them on the news or whatever. The movie really kind of takes up to remind you that doesn't mean that you know the whole story. That doesn't mean that you know them, or that you really have the right to judge them, because you can't know someone just from that. And I think that we can all relate to the childlike innocence that Kane is desperate to get back. It's visually striking, especially the shot with all the mirrors and Kane standing in front of it. That's my favorite shot. And obviously from a historical sense, the film also offered a lot as far as cinematic techniques. There's definitely a lot to appreciate about it, and I love it a lot. Number 7 is Finding Nemo. For me personally, this is a really special film because this is the first film that I remember going to a theater to see. I'm sure there might have been some others, but this is the first one that I can, distinctly remember going to a theater and sitting down. I think part of that might be because we actually went to go see it, 3 times. I remember the first time it was just my mom, my sister, and me. And then I think another time we saw it with our cousins. And I remember there was this other time where we went to our grandparents' house and Mom was like, "This movie is so good, you gotta go see it." And she just piled us all in our car and we just went to go see it with the grandparents. And it just brings back really fond memories. And it's really special for me. In terms of Pixar's top visually striking movies, I would say this is a very close second behind WALL-E. I love how graceful the movement is underwater and how energized it is on land. The animation in this movie is so good, I might have even put it on the list even if the story wasn't that great. But I mean, of course, the story is amazing. Even though conceptually it feels very simple, the themes it explores in regards to parenthood and bravery give it so much depth and make the film a really rewarding experience. Even though the characters are all fish, they're all driven by such powerful human spirit that it makes them very real. I think the thing that sets this movie apart from a lot of other animated films is that even though it's a kids movie, I feel like parents will get more out of it than the kids. The movie asks a lot of questions about how much we should shelter our kids and how much we should let them explore the world despite the risks it has. It does a very effective job. It's always left a huge impact on me, especially with my love of film. Like I've said before, Pixar is one of the main reasons I'm doing what I'm doing now, and I owe a lot to them because of that. I remember watching all of the behind-the-scenes specials for the movie with my sister, and we were just so fascinated by the work that went into making it, and I owe it a lot personally. Number 6. Y'all ready for some more cliches? Okay, so I know that there were a ton of Star Wars movies, and you guys are probably wondering which one I'm putting on this list. Obviously The Last Jedi, because it has porn. I'm kidding. I do love porgs, I do. They're amazing, but I decided that for the purpose of this list, I'm gonna put all 3 of the original trilogy in one spot. I mean, technically, my favorite would have to be Empire Strikes Back. Again, I know, very original. But I really do hold the other 2 in the trilogy to such a high standard that I just decided that screw it, I'm just gonna put them all on here and just be done with it. Again, I really don't have to explain why I love these movies so much. I think Star Wars is just a perfect blend of everything that's great about film. The thing that's so ingenious about them is that George Lucas took a lot of archetypes from old Western movies, particularly characters and plot points, and was able to make something completely new from them. I also love how the sets were so different from other sci-fi movies at the time. I feel like George Lucas was more intent on making the sets look lived in and real, whereas a lot of other sci-fi movies at the time, everything looked very clean and sterile, and I feel like George Lucas wanted to do something different from that. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark, again, there's a lot to appreciate about the movie, particularly as you grow up. You can get anything out of it, regardless of how old you are. I can't really say anything else about these movies that hasn't already been said. I love them to death, and I always will. Number 5 is Inside Out. I just love the world, the mind that they create, and all the individual characters. Another thing that I think Pixar is so good at is keeping a nice balance and giving a lot of depth and texture to their characters. Different emotions could easily have been so over the top, and their emotion could have been their one defining character trait, but I feel like they're so much more complex and they're never too in your face or over the top. And the message that it discusses is also an important one, particularly here in the US. I feel like as a society we've kind of created this idea that it's bad to feel anything but happiness. You know, people don't want to be around people who are sad or angry or anything like that. You know, we always have to be happy all the time, and we've kind of normalized this culture of niceness, but the movie teaches you that you can't be happy all the time. There are times where you're gonna feel mad, there are times where you're gonna feel scared or sad, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I actually do kind of wish that this movie had come out when I was in middle school. I was kind of going through some difficult times back then, and I didn't really know like how to handle it. I was just kind of telling myself to ignore how I was really feeling, and I didn't want to admit what was going on. And I think that this movie could have really kind of opened my eyes and made me think about how I was dealing with the situation and, you know, think about things a little bit better. I mean, from the moment I saw it, the film just had such a deep impact on me, and it feels weird to say that a movie can change your life, but if any movie has done that for me, it would be this one. Number 4 is The Dark Knight. Okay, so I'm actually planning on doing a full review of the entire Dark Knight trilogy, so I'll keep this one kind of brief, but oh my god, I love this movie! It's amazing! Something that I think a lot of people tend to forget is just the sheer amount of effort that goes into filmmaking, which is actually kind of a good thing, because like I said before, you know, that's what the main goal is. They want you to just be focused on the story and the characters and not be thinking about what's going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of work that goes into making you believe that what you're seeing is real. And now obviously every movie I've talked about in this list had a lot of work put into it, but for this movie especially, I feel like it really just leaps out of the screen at you. Every single minute detail of this film feels like it was crafted and tweaked to perfection, whether it's the story, the dialogue, or even just set pieces. One particular part of the movie that sticks out in my mind is the character of Coleman Reese. He's the guy that kind of tries to blackmail Batman in the beginning. And that scene could have just been like a filler sequence that doesn't appear to have anything to do with the plot at first, but he comes back later into the movie and plays such a central part of what's going on in the main conflict. And I think that it was just such a clever move on Christopher Nolan's part. I think he very easily could have just been like a throwaway character, like we see in a lot of in some Marvel movies, and particularly the DC movies now. But I think that what they did with the character was just so clever. Of course, Heath Ledger was amazing. Respect, rest in peace, I love the man. It makes a great commentary on terrorism, has great action. If you haven't seen the movie, you're really missing out, so yeah, go watch it. Number 3 is The Little Mermaid. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, the main reason why this movie is so high on the list is because of childhood nostalgia, although obviously, from a critical standpoint, there is a lot to admire about this film still. The animation is really, really good. It was actually the last Disney movie to be hand-drawn, and it still holds up today. It looks fantastic. The story actually involves a lot of suspense, too, which is kind of surprising for, like, a Disney princess movie. Especially considering the last one was, I think, Sleeping Beauty, and while that movie is by no means bad, I feel like it follows the very generic, standard fairy tale, formula, shall we say, whereas this film kind of mixes it up a little bit. And it was kind of, I feel, the first movie to do that, really, which is pretty cool. Obviously, it also began the Disney Renaissance, so we have this film to thank for, like, a bajillion other Disney movies, so, you know, that's always awesome. A lot of criticism of this movie usually goes towards Ariel. You know, some people have said that she hasn't learned anything in the movie, that she just wants something and gets it. And, okay, yeah, while it is true to an extent, I look at the movie more through how she impacts others as opposed to how other people impact her. I really like that she's independent and that she thinks for herself, which kind of allows her to bring the humans and mermaids together, instead of, like, the mermaids just fearing the humans and wanting nothing to do with them. And I think that her rebellious streak sets her apart from a lot of other Disney princesses, which I guess is why I'm more drawn to her as a character. I feel like the fact that she also does have flaws, like she is kind of a brat and she is a little selfish at times, I feel like that makes her more interesting as opposed to the other Disney princesses who are just oh so perfect. Like they have like no flaws whatsoever. I like that she is a little more unique in that sense. I would also make the argument that she actually does learn something at the end. When Ursula has her captured, it is a very brief scene, but there is a moment where she tries apologizing to her father. So even though it is a short scene, I would argue that she does kind of realize that, to an extent, what she did was wrong. I've loved this movie my whole life. I always will, and it'll always have a very, very special place in my heart. So, yeah, it's good. Number 2 on the list is The Truman Show. When I first saw this movie, I was in 7th grade, and we watched it in class. We were doing a unit on advertisements, which I don't really get what this has to do with that. I know that, like, there is a thing where, like, there are ads, like, on the show, like, when characters are talking to Truman, and suddenly out of nowhere they'll just be like, hey, look at this product. But that's not really, like, what the movie's about, so I don't really get why we watch this, but, I mean, I'm not complaining, because this movie's awesome and I love it, so what do I care? Considering the type of movies that Jim Carrey is usually in, I didn't really have any expectations for this movie, other than the fact that I had no idea what it was. I'd never even heard of it. I had no idea what it was, and I was just waiting to get out of school, basically, so I wasn't super intrigued when I first started watching it, but by the end, I was just completely stunned and blown away, and for a while, I almost didn't know how to feel about it. Like, the ending, something about the ending was just so profound and so impacting that it just, I don't know, it left me in shock. After a few days, I really thought about it, and I realized that I think that this is one of the best movies that's ever been made. So for those of you who don't know, the premise is that Jim Carrey plays this man that's on this TV show, but he doesn't realize it, and the TV show is basically his entire life. He's basically playing a character on this show, but he thinks it's all real. He doesn't realize that everyone around him is just an actor, and his entire world is completely fake and staged. The way that they tell the story is really clever. You don't automatically know there's a TV show, you don't know what's going on. Like Truman, you kind of have to use the clues around you to figure it out for yourself. Jim Carrey gives probably one of the best performances of his career. I love how easily and effortlessly he bounces from being relatable to funny to a little bit creepy. And I think the movie and the message is really relevant today, especially with, you know, people's lives being so publicized on social media and everybody pretty much being able to see everything we do. This movie actually kept me up at night thinking about it. It's so smart, it's really effective, it's just a masterpiece, and I love it. Number 1. So yeah, my favorite movie of all time is 2001: A Space Odyssey, and honestly, like, I don't even really know where to begin with this movie. I mean, I just think everything about this movie is breathtaking. I mean, from the cinematography, to the music, to the practical effects. I mean, it just feels so ahead of its time in just so many ways. I mean, before I had seen it for the first time, like, if you had shown me, like, a single frame from the movie and said this was made in 1968, honestly, I wouldn't have believed you. I mean, it's just, every shot in this movie is just so mesmerizing to look at. I mean, I still remember, the first time I watched it, it was after I'd had kind of like a difficult week, and it was a movie that I've been wanting to see for a long time. We bought it at like a Barnes & Noble, where they had like a rack of like the top 100 movies of all time, and I'd been meaning to see it, so I just figured I'd buy it, and I didn't get around to watching it for a while, but I was just feeling kind of down, and I just decided to watch it, and it just made me feel so much better. Like, I just felt completely like entranced in the movie, and I just forgot everything else, and I just get that feeling every time I watch it. But something that I really appreciate about it is just how unconventional it is, which ironically has also kind of led it to its greatest area of controversy. I know that the film has a lot of, like, drawn-out sequences, like, taking, like, 10-15 minutes to show it just, like, a ship docking, like, the fact that, like, 20 minutes at the beginning of the film is just a bunch of apes just doing stuff. And of course the ending, which is, like, so bizarre, and, like, there are, like, a billion different theories about what it means. I mean, I have my own, but who's to say if it's right, per se, like, if there is a right answer, really. Personally, I think the thing that needs to be understood about 2001 is that it's really not a film driven by story or plot, which I think throws a lot of people off guard. I think it's really more concerned with setting up its environment, its tone, its visuals, and things like that, than it is really moving along any story. It's really more like setting up a feeling than it is setting up a story, if that makes any sense. And we've seen, like, a couple other filmmakers do this. Like, I know that's a lot of Terrence Malick films are like that. They're not really, like, driven by any story. They just have, like, a character or, like, an idea or something, and they just go with it, and it's just showing a bunch of, like, random images and not really following, like, a cohesive story. I know that type of movie's not really for everybody, but for me personally, I think that there's just something so unique and so just captivating about it, and I just love watching it so much. And I get that there are a lot of people who say, like, it's pretentious and they don't really get it, and that's fair. I mean, it's definitely not for everybody, but I think that even if you don't enjoy it personally, you still have to acknowledge that it is a marvel for a lot of technical and historical reasons. I think it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, landmark in cinema history for pretty much everything from its style to its practical effects. I actually recently went to go see, like, a 50th anniversary screening of 2001, in this, like, old theater in Boston, where they were showing, like, I think the original, like, 1968 cut of it, on film. And it was just so cool to see it, like, in an actual theater, like, the way that it was meant to be seen, although I guess, like, they were having some problems with the projector that day, so they'd have to, like, keep, like, stopping the film every 10-15 minutes or so they could, like, manually change out the reels, which kind of sucked, but I mean, it was still, I still think it was worth it to see it, in, like, this huge theater, and it's really cool. Yeah. There's no other film that gives me the same experience when I watch it, and it's almost hard to put into words. Like, this has probably been, like, the hardest part of this video to film, because I feel like I'm just kind of sounding like a bumbling idiot, because I honestly just don't know how I can even put into words how good this movie is, and how much I love it, and I mean, it's just such an incredible experience in so many different ways, and I'm just fangirling so hard right now. I mean, for me personally, I think that this movie just really taught me how powerful a film can be, and I think that it just exemplifies everything that film is supposed to be, and I love it so much, and I'll keep watching it a million times in the future, and I'll never stop. So yeah, those are my favorite movies of all time, and I'm in a pretty good mood now after talking about that. I feel like I've been, like, hiding down here this entire video, but yeah, this is not exactly the ideal place for filming, but I don't really have anywhere else, so yeah. Yeah, so, those are my favorite movies, and I hope you enjoy them as well, and if you haven't seen any of them yet, hope you check them out. And feel free to share your favorite movies in the comments so I can judge you. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so that's it.